Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Book Records. So, RuleSticks addresses abbreviations, numerals, and symbols. So, with regard to abbreviations, there's a table at the end of the book that lists specific abbreviations for any number of, or most types of things you'll need to abbreviate in citations. I would have those tables open, ready to go, and kind of scan where things are located within the tables. Blue Book recommends that if an abbreviation is not in the book, that it should be avoided unless space will be saved and it's not ambiguous. So in terms of spacing, Blue Book closes single capitals, the spaces between single capitals. So Northwest will close that up. Southern District of New York would close that up. We don't close spaces with longer abbreviations. So if it's a single abbreviation followed by a longer abbreviation, we don't close that up. For example, Supreme Court. S period space CT period. So in terms of periodical names, we close up the single capitals when except when the capital refers to an institutional entity. So the first example they give is the Georgetown Law Journal. We close it up. But in the second example, we have BC space law review, because the first to represent, we need to set it off referring to an entity, that it's separate from the law and review. Right? We have NYU. We set that off from the L and the review. So individual numbers and are treated as single capitals. So the F period 3D, we would not include a space for that. I think of it as, including the TH. So in the third example, we have ALR fourth. For purposes of the spacing, that 4 is a single capital. But as we mentioned at the beginning, we insert a space into an abbreviation when one abbreviation contains 2 or more letters. Right? It's kind of the example here would be F sup 2D. We have a space between there. Close up initials in personal names. The example being W.C. Fields. So periods. Every abbreviation should include a period. Unless that where the last letter is set off by an apostrophe. So the example, department. So DEP apostrophe T, no period. Some entities use abbreviations for whatever reason without the periods, always follow those conventions when that is the case. So one example, United States, when it's used as an adjective, we abbreviate it to US. That's U period S period no space. So the example is US history. But not in the noun when it's used as a noun, right? History of the United States. So numerals and symbols. So basically, we spell out numbers 0 to 99 in text and in footnotes. For larger numbers, use numerals. There's an exception if the number begins a sentence, it needs to be spelled out. And when there's a series of numbers that includes numbers less than 100 and numbers above 100, then we defer to using numerals for the entire series. If the numeral uses a decimal point, then you have to use a number. When we're repeatedly referring to percentages or dollar amounts, then we need to use numerals for that. If we're using sections or subdivision numbers, we use numerals. For ordinals, if it's part of a citation, then numerals are used for all ordinal numbers, and we don't use superscripts. So second, 41st, fourth, we would say, so for example, fourth, we would put 4th, no superscripts. So fourth edition. So for example, if we are in textual sentences where that requires a numeral to be used for 2 and 3, we use ND and RD. But in citations, for figures using ordinals for 2 and 3, we take out the N on both. So it's 2D and 3D, not 2ND or 3ND. Neither situation is superscripts. So if it's in the text, you add the N. If it's in a citation, you take out the N. So now these section, kind of like the double S, and paragraph symbol. If it's the first word of a sentence, it needs to be spelled out. In the text, spell out the words section and paragraph. There's an exception in this. The Blue Book says unless you're referring to a provision of the U.S. Code or a federal regulation. When you're using section or paragraph in a citation, then the symbol needs to be used. So we always put a space in between the symbol and the numeral. Now, dollar signs and percent symbols. So when numerals are used, the general rule is use the symbols. When the numbers should be spelled out, the symbols should be spelled out. There's no space between the dollar sign and the parenthesis sign, and the symbol should never begin a sentence. So this is rule 6. Thanks, everybody. We'll take a short break and then come back to rule 7.